Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar on accompanying Sudanese people in reflecting about the situation, but most than that, building peace and building bridges for peace in the country. So I will present briefly a context. So Sudan's current reality represents a catastrophic descent into genocidal violence, with UN fact-finding missions confirming that atrocities in Al-Fashar bear the hallmarks of genocide, as the rapid support forces systematically target civilian populations with mass killings and related atrocities. This escalation occurs within a context of repeated diplomatic failures, where previous ceasefire agreements have consistently collapsed, not due to the lack of effort, but because of the RSF deliberately exploited these truces as tactical opportunities to reorganize, solidify advantages, and avoid accountability. While the international community has responded with targeted sanctions against RSF commanders by the United States, United Kingdom, and European Union, these punitive measures remain insufficient without a coordinated, comprehensive strategy that addresses the underlying power, dynamics, and incentives driving the conflict. Pax Christi International, as a global Catholic peace movement, accompanies efforts made by Sudanese civil society organizations and faith-based organizations because we believe you and others could play a transformative and assertive role in Sudan's peace building. How? By leveraging your unique position as locally grounded actors to bridge the deep divides that have paralyzed formal peace processes. Civil society organizations could establish and facilitate community-led dialogue platforms that bring together representatives from different ethnic groups, civilian populations affected by the conflict, for the creation of spaces where grassroots perspectives on justice, resource distribution, and power sharing can be heard and incorporated into peace negotiations. Faith-based organizations could harness their moral authority and extensive networks to challenge the narratives of dehumanization that fuel the conflict, while simultaneously promoting humanitarian aid that build trust and demonstrate solidarity with Sudanese civilians. To you and to all the resilient people of Sudan, both those standing firm in your homeland and those carrying the torch from distant shores, we as Pax Christi International, all our movement, we stand with you in solidarity, witnessing your resilience and unwavering commitment to justice. Your struggle is not just against violence, but for a future built on the foundation of nonviolence and restorative justice, principles that honor the dignity of all people in Sudan. We honor your commitment to nonviolence resistance, knowing that the most powerful weapon against oppression is not the gun, but the unbreakable human spirit that refuses to dehumanize even those who dehumanized you. This principle of nonviolence is your legacy and your greatest strength. So today, I, Marta Inés Romero, as Secretary General of the movement, welcome you and all the audience to participate, to reflect, to pray, to continue with you, the Sudanese people, in this struggle for peace building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for this word. Sometimes I don't know what to say after what you're saying, because you are saying a lot with a lot of emotion about what's happening in Sudan. Actually, what's happening in Sudan, although that we are seeing a lot of people are going back to Sudan, give us the feeling that Sudan is healing. We are going to the right path, but this is not the truth. This is just from the outside, but from the inside, Sudan, it is still hurting. The people who return to Khartoum are facing the reality of rebuilding everything from the scratch, their home, their life, and especially the social fabric that has been tortured by the RSF and by this conflict. Also, meanwhile, people in Darfur and Kordofan continue to carry the heaviest burden of this war. They are still being attacked. Just this week, the RSF attacked the campus of the University of Kordofan, and just today, the RSF killed 28 persons by attacking a hospital at Al-Mustariha in North Darfur. So this is show us the violence is continue, that the attacking is continuing and the killing is still there. So in this context of this webinar, this is the context of this webinar. Our purpose is to look what's happening, to understand the forces driving this conflict, and to explore the possible paths toward a just and lasting peace. We're going to start our webinar by our first speaker is Matt Gabriel. We all know Matt from our previous webinar. Gabriel Matt is an independent researcher in the political and international relations. He holds a master's degree in the political and international relations from Doha Institute for Graduate Study. He also published numerous studies and written several articles. His latest publications was in Democracy Under Fire, the battle between negotiations and military force in Sudan, 2-year civil war. He also wrote an overview to give a better understanding about the conflict in Sudan. His research focuses in Horn of Africa, peace, security, conflict resolution, with a specific interest in Sudan and South Sudan. So I will give the floor to Matt to tell us and to give us an overview about the conflict on Sudan and what should be done. Matt, you can start.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mawa, for that kind introduction, and thank you, Pax Christi International and the Journal for Social Counters for organizing such a timely webinar to discuss the ongoing crisis in Sudan. I'm delighted to be speaking back today and alongside co-distinguished panelists who have enjoyed reading the work and also watching the incredible work over the years, especially for John. I will be speaking today about the overview of the situation in Sudan, and I prepared a PowerPoint slide just to help me go through the presentation. My topic today, I was asked to speak about overview of Sudan current situation. And all of you, as we are aware, the war of Sudan started in April 2023, when the fighting started between the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces in the capital of Sudan, Khartoum. Then the war spanned from the capital Khartoum to other states of Sudan, and causing a lot of suffering for Sudanese people and severe human rights violation that has been documented by international organizations such as the UN agencies. This war now is more than 1,000 days. Sudan has been suffering from the continuous war and failure of achieving peace through mediators, which up to this month we have seen effort, but yet this effort feel insufficient to reach or to put an end to the conflict in Sudan. But before talking about the mediator and what are the proposals that has been put forward, let me just first speak about the actors. Who are the actors of the conflict in Sudan and the dynamics of the conflict? We have Sudan Armed Forces, which is commonly known as SAF, is the main national Sudanese armed forces, with its allies, and the Sudan Armed Forces SAF view itself as the national armed forces. Yet it is also been accused of committing crimes and also obstruction of aid, and its leader has been subject to sanction. On the other hand, we have the Rapid Support Forces, which evolved from the Janjaweed, the infamous Janjaweed that committed crimes in Darfur since 2003, when the war started in the western part of Sudan. And we have also civilian political forces who are divided along the two main rivalry of the conflict of Sudan, as I will explain later on. But before that, let me just say that the war in Sudan right now, we are entering 3 years. It still is war about narrative. Who own the narrative and who started the war and why the war is being fought. If you ask anyone who is supporting or anyone who is on the side of the Sudan National Army, which is SAF, the word simple, they will say the Rapid Support Forces started the war. and it's being backed by external actors. But if you ask also anyone from the side of the rapid support forces, they will say they are fighting the Islamists. While we have the other civilian forces who led actually the revolution that toppled the President Umar Bashir that appeared here on the right on the screen, they will say also they are fighting. The war actually is being driven by the Islamic desire to come back to the government, and they're influencing, and also they're preventing the Sudan armed forces from reaching a compromise with the rapid support forces. So we have the war on the ground, and also we have the war of narrative that is still making more difficult for the mediators to reach an end, or to put a proposal that could compromise the desire of the two parties, how to end the conflict. On the government side, or the national army staff, we have several other groups that are aligned themselves with SAF. This group has been very critical in SAF control since the coup of 2021 October. Mainly the regional the bloc called the Democratic Bloc, that is compromising of political parties that signed the Juba Peace Agreement, which ended the conflict in Darfur. These are the Darfur armed formation that fought the General al-Bashir for close to 2 decades, and plus the Sudan People Liberation Movement that led by Malik Agar, who is now deputy to Burhan, and the Islamic, as I mentioned earlier, Islamic groups such as the Bara bin Malik and the youth movement that fought the demonstration, and that led to toppling of al-Bashir. Now they are siding, some of them they are siding with the Sudan armed forces, and we have some of the armed and political group that in Eastern Sudan that are being funded and supported by Eritrea. This also these actors, whether they are political or armed actors, are still also they are part of the war in somehow, but also they have their own interests in how the war will be, and that's why later on we will see they are putting pressure on the side of the Sudan armed forces, as well on the side of rapid support forces. And I believe this is one of the issues that really the mediators should take a look at, because it's putting pressure, and meanwhile undermining any effort that could not put their interests also on the table. And this will lead me to talk about the dimension of the conflict. For anyone who has been following Sudan over the years, anyone can observe just a simple thing. This war is about ideology, and I mean by ideology, just 3 days ago, the leader of SAF, the leader of Afghan, the leader of Rapid Support Forces visited Uganda and met with President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni. But during the meeting with their supporters, and in the first public rally that Hemeti did, he signals more ideology to that aligned with Sudan Liberation North, led by Abdulaziz Al-Hilo. He talked about being secular. Sudan need to be in secular state. Sudan need to fight the Islamics and all this. And this is clearly a sign of the war is taking the ideological dimension. Also, the fighting is about the resources, gold resources. So, Rapid Support Forces has been uh, getting support from external actors, and also while also having their own financial network that has been part of the why they want to compete and why they want to remain and stakeholders in the Sudanese politics and government. The war also we can take a look at it from the Eastern conflict or Eastern dimension, especially in the war in Darfur, because the war in Darfur is taking totally different dimension from the war in the capital. It was in the capital in Sudan, and also the regional dimension. UAE has been accused for providing support for the SAF, and this is led to prolong the conflict for more than 3 years. And continuation of the war that has led to severe impact on the civilian. According to many reports, especially the UN agencies, 14 million have been displaced. 9 million of them, they are internally displaced, and 4 crossed the border to neighboring countries, Egypt, Chad, South Sudan, and others. And while within this movement of forceful movement of Sudanese people, atrocities continue to be committed throughout the war, and UN and other agencies, other countries such as the United States also have documented and also considered what is happening, especially during this the siege of Rapid Support Forces in Darfur or Fashil. Crime has been committed with deliberate intention to eliminate those who are defending Al-Fashir and also the civilian were under the siege in Al-Fashir. Since the Al-Fashir has fallen, we have seen videos, the very disturbing videos of the civilian are being targeted just based on their ethnic identity. This continuation of violation, human rights violation, led to the United Nations and the European Union and the United States to sanction those who are committed those crimes, and it's kind of putting pressure to the main party to the conflict to make them respect the international law, and also trying to accept the proposal that have been offered to bring an end to the conflict in Sudan. If we can take a look at the screen here, we have seen the entities and the leadership of the SAF and the leadership of Rapid Support Forces and other militias has been sanctioned for different reasons, for providing financial network, and also for providing arms for external actors. All these are being part of the conflict, and is putting the two parties to continue the war because they've been avoiding accountability. And this will lead me to the question of justice. The question of justice and the search for justice in Sudan, whether external or domestic, is a very fundamental question that all of the stakeholders they should look at, because ignoring this, the issue of accountability with the history of the crime that has been committed in Sudan will always open the door for others to commit the crime in the future. That's why I do believe in this time around, as a civil society organization should emphasize more on the issue of justice, the issue of accountability, whether regardless of who committed, all of those people who have been indicated, they should be brought to justice. And in the case of Sudan, I'm happy to see for very first time the ICC has been indicated Ali Koshef, who is famously a member of the Janjaweed that committed the crime in Darfur in early 2000s, has been sentenced to 20 years. And this is a beginning of accountability being and for the victim, actually for the victim of justice, to see justice has been served. Moving on to the most important part of the presentation is the mediation, and I can divide it into two. The one we can call it African-led track. This mediation with mainly the regional bodies. We have the African Union and IGAD, which is the regional bloc in East Africa. All of them propose to end the conflict in Sudan, but face a lot of challenges during presenting those proposals, challenges that related to the institutions lacking limitation, and also the viewing of the conflict and the parties of this organization. For example, Sudan has been suspended from the African Union since the coup October 2021, which limit the African Union involving Sudanese government within its meetings. And that's why Sudan government or the army view anything comes with African Union without this suspension being revoked, and also could undermine any effort from the African Union. Same as to IGAD, Sudan suspended its membership from the IGAD, but this month Sudan has been rejoined the participation. And simply the priorities of this institution are they put three simple things. First, immediate humanitarian truce in Sudan. the transition to full ceasefire, and the launch of inclusive national dialogue. And this is are very crucial in achieving peace in Sudan. But with this proposal, we came to also to the most put forward proposal that led by US and led by Saudi Arabia and the Quad, which is compromising of four countries: US, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, UAE, that put together a proposal to pressure the parties to reach an agreement. And the senior advisor to President Trump just recently during the last meeting of the Security Council on 19 this month, he confirmed that he's working on final drafts of an agreement that will be presented to the parties to conflict in Sudan, which state that the parties need to accept this proposal to to accept a 3 months humanitarian truce, permanent ceasefire, and 9 months political transition to form a new government in Sudan that will be led by civilian and military deployment, especially for the SAF to the rapid support forces to withdraw from the city that under its control, especially in the Darfur region, and the UN to lead the monitoring mechanism that could separate the forces. And now we see how the government of Sudan or the national government of Sudan and the national army view this proposal, and how the Assis government or that is being led by rapid support forces how view these proposals. If we can look, we can take a look at what the Prime Minister of Sudan said during his presentation into UN Security Council December last year. He said two critical things that for Sudan he put forward as a national initiative for peace that being supported by his government, the government of Hope in Sudan. He says first, unified unified institution under the national institution in Sudan, which is to be the legitimate government, the legitimate body that could oversee the institution of Sudan. Second, to completely disarm, to withdraw of rapid support forces from all its cities that are territories that are under his control, while the rapid support forces put another proposal that counter this proposal of government of Sudan. And one of the main key issues that I can outline it here, the issue of Sudan being a secular state, being governed by a federal system, and rapid support forces want to be integrated as a political and military stakeholder, and which Sudan government is refusing. And this is why the mediators are struggling to find a compromise between these different political view of how to end the conflict in Sudan. And these views are being backed by regional or international bodies. For Sudan proposal, the African Union already accepted and is working to revive its proposal to end the conflict in Sudan. Egypt also has showed signal support for Sudan proposal, while for the rapid support forces, it signaled its support for the US Quad proposal, while made some recommendation to put into consideration. And the UAE has been accused of supporting SAF, and it's more likely that UAE is supporting the proposal of rapid support forces.
Matt, sorry for the disruption. Can we sum it up? Can we warm it up? Okay.
Yes,
Because
please.
wait.
Yeah. So this is this multiple international and regional bodies proposal. Sometimes we can feel are over competing or lacking of comprehensive unifying view that could lead to ending the conflict in Sudan. But there are some priorities that we can all agree on, that securing a humanitarian truce, and also the most important thing, halting the influx of arms and foreign fighters in Sudan, ensuring accountability and an inclusive dialogue among Sudanese stakeholders, whether they are political or military. And this could, whether to achieve it or to fail, could lead to three scenarios. One, the current stalemate that will continue with limited success, while the second scenario, limited de-escalations, and the last is for a total fragmentation, which could lead to a scenario of Libya. And this will lead me to a conclusion. I will just reiterate what I've said, that the challenges of mediators are immense, but putting all the stakeholders together, especially the voices of the civil society organizations, that are crucial, because they are the one who felt the the crisis of Sudan, and they have suffered enough through these 3 years. Bringing together the rapid support forces and the Sudan Armed Forces, unifying the mediation and ending the impunity, and also fighting humanitarian access that could allow civilians that are in need to access aid and medical and protection. I will stop here and I will look forward for the discussion.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for this informative presentation that shows us a lot about the current situations about Sudan and what's happening. So thank you for that. Thank you for enlightening us. Now we're going to move to another interesting presentation and two amazing speakers, two women. It's about the nonviolence and the path to peace in Sudan. So in this part, we're going to have two speakers. We're going to have Zahra Haidar Ibrahim. I'm honored to introduce you, Zahra. Zahra is a lifelong Sudanese activist and the founder and executive director of Y organization, which work on social change and civic engagement in Sudan. Zahra train and support young activists across Sudan and Africa, helping them strengthen their peace-building, advocacy, and community mobilization work. She is also part of the African Culture Network and the African Rising Movement. Zahra specializes in civic education, anti-corruption, democracy dialogue, and coalition building. She's the co-author of the United States Institute of Peace report, Sowing the Seed of Nonviolent Action in Sudan. And her organization also received the 2024 NED Democracy Award. The second speaker, I'm also really blessed to introduce her, Maria Morovich. Maria is currently an interim executive director of Qissa Group, an independent non-profit grounded in Sudan that defines a civic space under pressure. She has over 20 years of experience of working on right and governance in Eastern Europe, East Africa, and Eurasia, supporting civil society institutions in close conflict and fragile environment. As a pro-democracy activist in her native Siberia, she had participated in building pro-democracy movement and had campaigned using a strategy nonviolent principle. In Sudan, she has worked since 2013 with grassroots group, civil society, and individuals to increase citizen partnership in political process and more effectively advocated for right, justice, and representation. So we can call like Maria and Zahra, like Kandaka, like we call it in Sudan. So I'm giving the floor for the two of you to speak, and we are like really looking forward for them.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invite, and thank you everyone who joined us today. Before I start, can I ask if you can see the presentation? If it's working?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Great. So Zahra and I will talk today about the possibilities and potential of nonviolence in Sudan as one of the paths to peace. And I will start first to just offer a framework within which we can think about the role and the capacity and potential of nonviolence in the current war situation in Sudan and in the face of violent conflict. And then Zahra will take over and speak about how these concepts actually manifest on the ground in Sudan and what the concepts of nonviolence were able to achieve so far. So what we are going to talk about here, sorry, let me see if this is working. Yes. So while there is a value choice of nonviolence and there is a moral choice of nonviolence, there is also another perspective of how to use nonviolence, and that is nonviolence being part of the strategy and the political strategy or a strategy for a struggle for change. If we think about nonviolence as a strategy and as a strategic choice, we can isolate a couple of elements of that strategy. First, nonviolent strategy uses tactics that grow participation and they increase the following for that political strategy. Then, for nonviolence to be successful, it requires to have a unified goal, also unified method of struggle, and unified leadership. And by unified leadership, we primarily mean that the leadership of that nonviolent struggle is not fractured. Then the purpose of the nonviolence as a strategy, as I said, as a struggle or a political strategy, is really to shift the power balance. And it's basically removing the power from the power holders who are using violence or any kind of oppression. So how does that nonviolence do? It does that through practicing different tactics, which lead to mass participation and can lead to removing the power of power holders or limiting their power or pushing them to make certain concession. Through strategy of nonviolence and that application of participation and the politics is what you get is a lot of practice on the ground, how to make these decisions, and you strengthen the agency of the actors who are practicing nonviolence. Nonviolence also, in practice, builds an alternative institutions, whether these are alternative to the institutions of the oppressed or alternative institutions in the conflict. It is also building a civic infrastructure through the practice. Typically, the successful strategies when nonviolence is applied and when the mass participation is achieved, one of the ways to do that and shift the power balance is to withdraw cooperation. So mass withdrawal of cooperation, which is typically what we see as boycotts and strikes, is one of the manifestations of the nonviolent strategy in practice. And how do we recognize when we see it applied strategic nonviolence is that there is typically a movement as a result of all of that. So now, when we think about nonviolence in the context of armed conflict or a civil war, we often think about maybe nonviolence as just stopping the war, but we do not often think about what existence of nonviolent strategy in the face of war does for the peace. And I think Zahra and I will talk more about that other aspect and potency of nonviolence, basically. And that is how you rebuild after the conflict and what survives through the conflict, thanks to the existence of nonviolence. So the nonviolence contributes through allowing for community activities. And sometimes when the community is determined and has a good strategy, that can increase the cost for actors who are practicing the violence. So maybe when we don't see it in entire Sudan, maybe we can see it in at the locality level. Then nonviolent strategies and applications allow for civil society, and I mean but large civil society, to survive, to allow for alternative voice to exist, and basically to keep the communities together. Nonviolence builds bridges and helps reconstruct post-conflict, and we see that often in the post-conflict societies where there were campaigns for peace and nonviolence. Those actors were important bridges for the communities to heal. It builds muscles for governance because the practice through application of tactics and mass mobilization create dynamics in which actors are actively participating and running governance programs without even knowing them. Now there are some challenges as well, and this is more in the stop the war compartment of challenges. And that is that often, if it's a movement and if it's like a dispersed nonviolent actors, they find it difficult to find a representation at the elite level and the negotiation table. Then, if we are thinking about the nonviolent strategy as a way to shift the power balance and to remove cooperation through economic strikes, that is more difficult in the war economy to withdraw cooperation. And because in the war and the conflict and open hostilities, the risk is high and the operating space for nonviolent actors is much more constrained. So this is about a framework, and Zahra will now move to speak about what we see on the ground in Sudan. Zahra, I'm ready for you when you are.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks, Pax, to give us this chance to present our vision, our work, how we deal with this situation, critical situation, as you all know. As Mawa say, I am part of the organization called Y Organization. We always considering our organization as a movement because our target is social change in Sudan and how activism space be created everywhere. In Sudan and in region also. So one of the things I want to start with is the nonviolent action now in Sudan standard on December Revolution principle and vision that most of Sudanese stand on. It also, Maria, move.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So what we do now as a nonviolent resistance, previous, don't move. Yeah. So what we do now as nonviolence activists and organizations, civil society, resistant to violence now, the war, the fighting, is continuing and development, continuation, development, and adaptation of the tactic that we learned from the revolution itself. So we use the same tactic, but trying to develop it and improve it and adapting them with the situation, with the challenge that Maria presented in previous slide. Maria. So how we do that? We do 70 things now, and this is based of Y Organization and many civil society, many movement inside Sudan and outside Sudan doing. One of the very important things from the beginning of the war is serving communities and taking responsibility in the absence of the state under the war. So how this happened? One of the things I have to highlight is that the resistance and service committee, the neighborhood resistance and service committee were the nucleus of the emergency room and the initiatives in the ground. The use of the revolution were they are the one who launched the initiative that provide food, shelters, medical services. Their main resource is the trust of the people and the spirit of the revolution that created a state of cooperation and solidarity. And this is very important in the time of the war. And then we saw that in Ukraine, in Gaza, in different countries. Second things, in the absence of the country, in the absence of the institution of the country, they fill these gaps. Like in this picture from Adri camp in Chad, from one of the clinics that we as a Y participate in establishment, you see that medical server without the clauses of doctors or such, they provide the services in very, very hard situation. This is also repeated when we witnessed on it when the war started, when we see the engineering of electricity, water, they trying to solve the problem that destroyed by fighting, by the war itself, to ensure that the services reach people under the war situation. This is the second thing that they do it on serving communities. The third things, which is now is very, it's very clear, the use of the revolution, they started to reconstructing the area and building that have become safer. And this picture from Khartoum University, the activists come to the went to the Khartoum university and trying to prepare it for settlement and trying to send the message that we will continue. Let's rebuild our country. But this is just in Khartoum now, because Khartoum is more safe for people, not part of the army now. So this is the first things, doing the task of the government in absence of the government. The second things, and we as a Y work on that a lot, awareness leading with the reality of the war, physically and psychologically. There is a lot of trauma working happening inside Sudan, in shelters, in the IDP camps, and outside of Sudan with refugees in the camps and refugees in the countries that receive a lot of Sudanese. Also, people share a lot of things about you have to do that when the fighting come to your area, something like that. So this is the second thing. The third thing is confronting the hate speech, strengthening social fabric and promote social space. We also in Y work on that a lot, and our CBOs inside Sudan, in Darfur, in Kordofan, in Blue Nile area, in South Kordofan, and in East Sudan, doing that. Under the war, there is a lot of hate speech, a lot of things coming on the media and in the life also. People are not trusting their neighborhoods now based on what happened in Khartoum and on other area that happened. But we need to rebuild this relation. We need to strengthen this fabric. We also do that in the refugees camps, because people come from different ethnics, different geographic, different experience under this war. There is a huge need to relink them together, build trust between them, prepare them to peace, the post-war, what will happen after the war stop. We need the communities to have peace coexisting together. So we work on that a lot. The fourth things, decolonization, the world, and disseminating its narrative. One of the priorities of Y organization, and we work with it, is counter the media that had the machine, very strong machine for the both side of the war. They succeed in legitimizing the violence by the message and by the producer. The media machine was supported, had a lot of financial and technological support from outside Sudan. And we are working now to monitor and destruct this narrative, the war side narratives of the media machine. And we motivate activists and people who stand in the peace square to produce alternative narrative and counter the war narratives. So this is what we're doing also. One of the things that we do it also, number 5, reorganizing and building peace movement to mobilize and lobby for the peace. You know that in movement, it's very important to recruit more people, to organize people, to build the capacity of youth and women and the marginalized groups to push for the peace. And that's what we do it now. This picture from Kiriandangu camp in Uganda, one of our group, it's a youth group in the camp, and we have different groups in Kenya, Kenya, in Uganda, in Egypt, and inside Sudan in different area. And now we are connecting people from diaspora also, because it's very important to include Sudanese in diaspora on this process. The
Zahra, we are at the time it's up, like 1 minute more.
Okay, I will try to be very fast. Building the capacity of youth women and to ensure that they are in the leadership, and I think this is very clear. The 7 takes is launching campaign and supporting the international campaign who support peace in Sudan and push for peace of Sudan. So this is what we do as nonviolence activist and movement and civil society inside Sudan, or Sudanese and outside Sudan as well. But there is a challenge to be in reality. We face 4 challenges. I will be very fast on that. One of the first challenge is the human rights abuse and the crimes that happened in the ground make the nonviolence activity it's not realistic. There is a lot of anger, a lot of hurted, and there is a lot of advocacy for violence itself. So it's become like when you talk about peace or nonviolence, it's something not reality. This is one of the biggest challenges. That the second challenge, Maria, the war economy, and Maria talk about that. Activists and movement members don't have like the resources, and because of the economy situation, and they also sometimes pull to the square of the war because of their needs, of their life needs. The third challenge, Maria. The third challenge, most of activists, or there is a big number of activists now is in refugees countries, and the laws of these countries are not allow them to do any activities based on they don't have this right to mobilize or to push for the peace. The fourth and the last challenge that the first, the conflict between the peace forces itself, due of the short democracy, due of lack of experience, due of lack of trust, due of the previous conflicts itself. This is make us not unified. And Maria mentioned something about unifying forces and leadership, strategy and vision. And because of the previous experiences, we have problem on that. We have a big challenge on that. And thank you. That's my presentation. And sorry for you too long.
Thank you, Zahra, and thank you, Maria, for this amazing presentation, for highlighting an important role of the community and the youth, especially in building a country. Because what's happening in Sudan, the government had collapsed, the country has collapsed. So the community itself are rebuilding everything, the social fabric, the infrastructures, everything. So this is, I think, and also an important thing that we know. And so thank you so much, Maria and Zahra, for this great presentation. And now we're going to move to our last speaker that also I'm so excited for this presentation. It's by John Brendergast. So John, he's going to talk today about the legal arm and resources flow into Sudan and how to stop them. John is a U.S. human rights advocate focused on peace and anti-corruption effort in Africa. He served in National Security Council and the United States Department of State, contributing to a major African peace process. He later co-founded the Senator with George Clooney. He is author and co-author of 11 books, including Congo Story and Not on Our Watch. So the last thing that I want to mention, if you have questions for Maria, for Zahra, for Matt, or for John, please put it in the Q&A questions, and then we're gonna get it back later. And John, the floor is yours. You can be it.
Thank you so much, Mawa. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be with all of you today. The focus of my session, as you just said, is how to stop arms and illicit financial flows. And I have a confession. I'm not sure we can fully stop them. This is the usual NGO David versus Goliath battle, where the odds are just stacked in favor of the guys with the guns and the money. But as I learned as a very young activist, a luta continua. We look for windows of opportunity, we look for signs of hope, and we never give up. The human stakes are simply too high. So the context for what impact we can make on these two fronts is embedded in the larger dynamic. this proliferation of external actors in Sudan and in the surrounding region, many with competing agendas. The middle powers, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran, and Turkey on the side of the SAF, amongst others, and then the UAE on the side of the RSF. And then all of Sudan's neighbors are involved one way or another, some of them through direct arms deliveries, some as surrogates for the UAE. So if we're trying to stop arms and illicit financial flows, we have to consider all of these actors and their agendas. But most of you know this already, so I want to go right into some ideas and proposals of what can be done about this ongoing crisis. And I'd like to focus on three baskets of action: countering arms trafficking, countering conflict gold smuggling, and countering reputation washing. First, countering arms trafficking. I'm sure others in this Zoom community here are much more knowledgeable about this space, about arms trafficking, but I'd like to identify 5 actions that might make a bit of a dent and hope that in the discussion, wiser voices can either correct me or expand on this list. First, many of us have worked for years in support of expanding that UN arms embargo to the entire country, because now it just relates to Darfur. That has run into one roadblock after another in the United Nations Security Council, and I'm not sure if it will ever see the light of day. Second, in the absence of expanding the embargo, some of us have worked for strengthening the enforcement of the embargo, at least as it pertains to Darfur. And that takes a number of forms, which could be covered in the discussion as well by those who are leading those efforts here on the Zoom. Third, in the US, for example, there's also legislation. We have the Stand Up for Sudan Act in Congress, which would ban sales of American defense articles to the United Arab Emirates until the president certifies that the UAE has stopped providing material support to the RSF. But as you all probably know, prospects for that legislation are fairly dim, though there's a continuing effort to try to push it forward, at least to make it a vehicle for reputation damage for the UAE. Fourth, as my organization, the Sentry, and others have revealed through their investigations, the UAE has financed Colombian mercenaries to train and fight on behalf of the RSF. And some of these key Colombian actors have been sanctioned now by the United States. But of course, the Emirati elements of that network have not been sanctioned yet. So we have a lot more work to do on that front. But it's an example of a third country that has introduced their military assets into the Sudan conflict and paying at some level of a price for that. Fifth, and finally, on the arms trafficking front, much more could be done to sanction the SAF and RSF officials and their international partners, the ones who are involved in arms trafficking. At this point, in terms of US, UK, and EU sanctions, there aren't that many companies yet and individuals on either the SAF or RSF side that have been sanctioned directly for their involvement in arms deals, as Maud pointed out earlier. So much more could be done on this, I think, with the proper amount of evidence. We have to go and find that evidence and present it and get these people sanctioned, and at least shut them out of the international financial system to the degree possible. So that's international arms trafficking. The second one is countering conflict gold. And I think that's already been raised, particularly by Maud, about how much conflict gold has helped fuel this conflict, given resources, not just the RSF, but the SAF, of course, smuggling through Egypt, ending up in Dubai for the most part. All the gold ends up in Dubai. But it's benefited both sides and allowed them to have an unaccountable aspect of their military spending. And for these recommendations and discussion, I have a colleague, Sasha Lezhnev, who we can consult if some of you have deeper questions than I can answer at this time. First, we at the Center have been advocating for a US and for a UK illicit gold task force to increase investigations and network sanctions against illicit and conflict gold traffickers, instead of just the usual one-off sanctions that have been issued thus far. Sanctions should be updated constantly as companies go out of business, or more importantly, change their names after they've been sanctioned. Easy to evade sanctions in this day and age without that kind of follow-up. The UK, for its part, recently set up a public-private partnership on illicit gold, and we're going to be pushing the Brits a lot to do more at this upcoming anti-corruption summit in June if it still happens. Second, we've also advocated for a Kimberley-like process for gold, Kimberley process being for diamonds, as you know, to independently monitor and certify the big global gold trading centers like the one in Dubai and in Hong Kong. This would build on the lessons of the EITI that some of you have worked on, Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, and the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme, of course, for conflict diamonds. So we build on the lessons from that and apply them to gold trade, which is a very difficult trade to regulate and even monitor. Third, we're pressing global banks and the gold refiners to mark the UAE as a red flag country for conflict gold laundering, given the huge volumes of conflict gold that are traded here from Sudan, Congo, and a number of other countries in Africa. Sudan and Congo are red flagged often by banks and by gold refiners, but unsurprisingly, the UAE is not. So we will push and push for that to make it harder for them, to raise the cost of doing business, for them to absorb and import so much smuggled gold that leads to death and destruction in Africa. Fourth, in the conflict gold area, Congress, again, legislation is a part of this, and it can be true in the European Union, of course, and in the UK and other jurisdictions that are focused on this. But in the US, Congress is working on legislation on illicit gold to get the US administration to increase its investigations and its sanctions and its partnerships on illicit gold. There already is an illicit gold bill. Number is S799, which is live. The United States Legal Gold and Mining Partnership Act. So that's a start. It could be improved. We're working on improving it, but there at least is a recognition on the part of the legislature in the US that more needs to be done, and they need to push the executive branch to do it. And finally, we're urging the gold industry, like through the London Bullion Market Association, one of the big gold associations, the LBMA, as it's known, set up a new requirement for all gold refiners to disclose their high-risk suppliers. So we want that to be fully implemented, and for the UAE, of course, to be red flagged because they don't disclose anything with respect to their high-risk suppliers. So those are some ideas on the conflict gold front. Now to the third category of action, particularly related to UAE, but also to Saudi Arabia, is countering reputation washing. For those two countries, for the Emirates and for Saudis, reputation washing is a critical objective globally, and they're perfecting it into an art form, I would argue. Sports are their primary vehicle for this reputation laundering. Because their commercial branding relationships all over the world with sports leagues and sports teams are such a source of national pride and so successful at burnishing their reputations, these branding relationships also create, in our view, a vulnerability for the UAE and the Saudis. If we can create negative connotations with a portion of the fan bases of some of these leagues and teams, we can begin to turn the reputation washing into reputational damage. We have a coalition here in the US that includes some internationals, anyone's welcome, that is presently focusing on the NBA's relationship with the UAE. The NBA is the National Basketball Association, the American Basketball League that is a global brand, and they have a fairly substantial branding relationship with the UAE. The coalition website that works on this is called speakoutонsudan.org. In the UK, there have been and are efforts to address the UAE's relationships with Arsenal, and Gunners for Peace is the organization that's worked on that, and Manchester City, Christian Solidarity Worldwide, is leading the work there in the Premier League. And those are because they're the two top teams in the Premier League, and they're going to be battling it out for the championship. It's a real opportunity to raise this red flag about the team's relationships with the Emirates as the Emirates funds genocide in Sudan. And I believe if we're going to have a chance at successfully altering the UAE's incentives for continuing to support the RSF, it's going to be through damaging the UAE's reputation by undermining its sports washing arrangements and other reputational laundering arrangements that it has created around the world. Others on this call hopefully will have other views about that, and I'm looking forward to them, but that's where I'm putting a lot of my eggs at this point. Meanwhile, I'll close by telling you why I personally remain hopeful after 4 decades of working on Sudan issues. I look at the history of grassroots movements, most importantly inside Sudan, in terms of citizen protest and peace movements that have made a difference throughout the independent Sudan's history. But also efforts that I've been lucky enough to join over the years, such as the anti-apartheid movement, South Africa, the Blood Diamonds campaign for West African diamonds, the counter LRA push in Uganda, the Lord's Resistance Army, and other such efforts over the years. They're all David versus Goliath odds at the beginning, but sometimes the slingshot makes contact. So we'll see if that's the case with the efforts to influence the UAE to stop supporting genocide in Sudan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Was great. A lot of information also to grasp about what's happening in Sudan. The unfortunate that we all know the UAE is playing a huge part of this war, but nothing can be done. There is a lot of evidence, a lot of had been said, but still there is no actual actions against the UAE. The gold, we can see this with the amount of the gold that just entered the UAE in the last year. It was just striking. Also, we cannot forget also the EU, how they are playing a huge part of this war. So here I will leave the floor for Julia to continue. And remember, if you have any questions, please you can write it in the Q&A box, and then our speaker will answer for your questions. So Julia, the floor is yours, and thank you, John, again.
Thank you very much to all the speakers first for your very valuable contribution. I've been taking notes, I tried to be as fast as I could because you really shared a lot of information, very useful and very crucial. And I also like the fact that all of you really underlined the importance that no matter how little we are, how small we are, we can still make a difference. So thank you very much for that. We have very few questions for now from the Q&A, so I kindly ask to anyone that still wants to ask a question to please do so. But I have first a general question for all of you. I hope you have listened to each other a little bit. So I want to ask you, first of all, if you have either a question or a comment to any of the presentation you heard, like some exchange you would like to make or adding, a relevant note that you might find useful for the other speakers. So if you have any.
The only thing I would say real quick, just to break the ice, is that it's so important, the nonviolent, peaceful advocacy that occurs inside Sudan. And rest assured, all of the stuff we're talking about in terms of power politics and illicit finance and sanctions, equally important, I believe, is support, solidarity, and material support for the groups inside Sudan that are on the front line struggling for human rights, for democracy, for freedom. So I think that outside-inside effort is absolutely critical, and I'm so glad that you connected these two things together.
Thank you, John. You're not obliged not to. So, Mad Maria or Zara, if you want to also do the same exercise.
Yeah, I have just for Maria regarding the non-violence. I have been following the peace negotiation for Sudan for quite some time now, but have noticed something repeatedly itself in all these negotiations, whether between the South and the North during the CPA, which the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, or the Darfur Peace Agreement, or even now with the mediator are trying to put an end to conflict in Sudan. Non-violence group, especially the civil society organization, normally they get the invitation for during the talks, but during the final draft for the agreement, normally those who are fighting, those who have arms on their hands, they put their interest in the final draft, and they put their say whether it's no or yes, while excluding the non-violence group or all civil society organization. How can we ensure that the non-violence organization, civil society, have the right and have the input in the final drafts of all the agreements, or any just the compromise that it may happen between the SAF and the rapid support forces?
Yeah, that is $1 million question, quite honestly, because a lot of movements, and especially the groups around the world, are struggling with the same thing. And that is, first, there are two issues. There is like civil society organizations with structures and institutions, and then there is a movement, which is a larger campaign or a larger body that can mount pressure. So civil society without the movement behind doesn't have the pressure that can basically put them in the position of the power that they possibly have behind them if they are supported by the movement. That is one challenge. And then the other challenge is that a movement by its nature has diversity, has dispersed leadership, has an organizational structure often under the movement, but that organizational structure is really not prepared, educated, skilled, and exercised to participate in these conversations, right? So we're basically talking about two different worlds, and I think everyone who is working with the movements or the grassroots actors is really struggling with the same question. And I think it's really for the movements to figure out, and the civil society to figure out first how they're going to use the power of the movement. Because when they have that power behind them, then they can put that power forward and exercise that power at the negotiation table. And then for the movements, how to understand that relationship between the civil society, and also how to acknowledge the shortage of knowledge and practice to participate in these high-level conversations. And I would just add another thing, because this is not only for Sudan, but I think globally what we see among especially the Gen Z movements is that what they're trying to do through participating, building movements, launching movements, they're really trying to provide an alternative institutions to the systemic institutions as we know them. And a lot of them are really experimenting with a participatory governance, participatory democracy, and kind of direct democracy. And we've seen that in Sudan through the neighborhood resistance committees. So I think it's a kind of also a race between the generation where I belong, and that we are looking at the system and we participate in that system as we were educated to it. And then we have an alternative that is coming from the ground up, where the new generations want to participate in their future, the building their societies in a completely different way. And we're working on a completely two different timelines, which is why at the high level negotiations, you have very, very structured institutional ways of deciding. And then from the grassroots, you have this cry for, we want to see democracy differently, and we want to see the institutions differently. I hope this was not too long, and I hope it helped kind of conversation.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, very much, Rita. I hope Maddie is happy with the answer. We have indeed a few questions now coming in. I will also try to summarize some of them just to not take too much time. So we have one question for Mad, the question is about what would you see as the main external actors fueling the war? And there is a reference on the influence that Russia might have played and is playing within the conflict. Anything to share about this, Matt?
Okay, thank you for the question. For Russia, involvement in Sudan or the broader external actors in Sudan. For the Russia, let me just answer simply. Al-Bashir government, before he was toppled, he traveled to Russia and he signed an agreement that allows Wagner to come to the Sudan. And also, Russia also had their own interest that to have a base on the Red Sea. So in 2017, Russian came to Sudan and stayed during the transition after the Bashir, and with both accusation now, SAF now accusing, saying that the Russian groups are supporting the RSF, while the RSF leader also saying the Russian till now they are in the online with the government of Sudan because of they still interested on the having the base on the Russia. So I don't know exactly because this of uh, this is not easy to get, but I do believe like both of these parties, the SAF and the RSF, benefited in some way along the way from the Russian groups in Sudan, and they have extended their relationship to through arms, through even bringing expert in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of smuggling goals. All this has been happening throughout, but I'm not sure whether it has stopped or not. Regarding the other external actors, SAF accused UAE for supporting rapid support forces. That's why SAF sees the ability of rapid support forces to continuing waging the war has been mainly because of the support of the UAE. While rapid support forces has been accusing Egypt also for the national security of Egypt for siding with the Sudan armed forces and providing arms, technicians, and even political support for the army to sustain their position in the government and to be the main controller of the Sudan institutions. So other countries also came in along the way, like Iran. Some report indicated that SAF also started to get supplies of weapons from Iran, for Algeria, and other countries. So as long as the conflict is or the parts of the conflict continuing receiving arms and receiving support, more likely their ability or their willingness to sit and bring an end to the conflict more likely will be quite challenging.
Thank you very much, Matt. And through this link, I will go ahead with a question for John. You have quite a few, so I was trying to summarize them into one to make you work less, but unfortunately, probably I will be able to summarize very little. So there is a question about the issue related to gold from Sudan being blocked. And compared to the goal from the UAE being accepted. So the question is about which organizations is blocking Sudan's gold while accepting the other one.
I'm not entirely understanding that. I don't think anyone's blocking Sudanese gold export. Basically, just maybe we can go through it. So the RSF either taxes or organizes gold. Most of it is artisanal gold production and smuggles it out through companies that that the RSF has set up in partnership with Emirati companies. We're constantly trying to unearth what those companies are, who they are, who's behind them, because they change the names, as I said earlier, and constantly and of course operate in underground. And so the pipeline from Darfur gold and Kordofan gold into into the Emirates via sometimes Libya, via Chad, number of other countries the gold travels through. And it really is unobstructed for the most part. I mean, it's very hard to trace. And once it disappears into the souks, the markets, the gold markets in Dubai, it's gone. And any ability to sort of assess the nature of that, the origin of that gold it disappears. So there has to be a much more transparent approach by the Emirates, by Dubai in terms of receiving the gold that it gets both from a number of countries in Africa, by the way. Congo is dealing with this very same thing, probably in higher volume than Sudan. And the South Sudan gold, the gold from Tigray, through CAR gold, like just name it. I mean, all over West Africa, it's all going in there, and it's just fueling and funding instability throughout the region. So I wish I understood better the question, but one can see how difficult it is because you can put gold in a suitcase just like they used to do with diamonds and cross borders, and it's very, very hard to trace. So you have to create an internationally accepted system like there was earlier for blood diamonds, for there to be a real progress here. In the meantime, we can whack-a-mole, as they say. We can go after the various companies that are found to be dealing with illicit gold, whether it's Sudanese companies, other international Emirati companies, or other international companies. There are a number of different people profiting from this trade because it's very profitable, and you see the damage is just is metastasizing because of the price of gold on the international markets just skyrocketing over the last few years. And so it becomes more and more profitable to engage in this deadly trade. And it provides more and more money to both sides of the conflict because the SAF has their own channels for exporting gold, all to Dubai. Although the Saudis want to change that and they want to start getting their hands on some of this blood gold, which makes it even worse. So like it's just the repercussions of Gulf intervention in Sudan and the broader Horn of Africa and across the Red Sea and Yemen and Libya, I mean, in Syria, is just so damaging. And we're going to see just the repercussions of this, I think, intensify. So getting a handle on it as fast as possible, using the international gold associations, using the various mechanisms for accountability, is the way we can fight back, I think.
Thank you, John, very much. I will try to address the majority of this question, but I will already let everyone know in the webinar that we will not be able to reply to all your questions now. So what we will do, we will ask our speakers to provide their replies in writing, and then we will send you the replies along with the recording. So if we don't ask the questions now, don't worry, you will get your answer in a way or another. But there is a very interesting question that actually there are two that we can somehow merge that some of them are directed to a specific person, but I think we can find a way for everybody to answer to this. So one stems from John's experience based on the apartheid work in South Africa, the against apartheid work in South Africa, the Blood Diamonds campaign in West Africa. And the question is about really trying to understand how different today's world is from the 80s and the early 2000s, how we can still proceed with activism, considering that now we are living indeed in a different world. And this is a question that honestly I would like for everybody to answer to. Of course, John, you go first since you launched your background experience in this, but I would love for every speaker to reflect on this and provide your input.
Yeah, and I'm kind of one that has been lucky to be part of these things, and in the 80s and early 90s, with respect to the anti-apartheid movement, we were like, you know, demonstrating in front of the embassy in different countries and other forms of opposition. We boycotted certain items, got arrested, you know, civil disobedience. So those were important tactics at the time. I had the honor of being part of the Burundi peace negotiations with President Mandela, and he told us many times about how when he was in Robben Island, he was so filled with hope when he would get these reports about these efforts all around the world, people just organizing, especially young people, around anti-apartheid activities. And, you know, even though it seemed somewhat hopeless for many of those years, it was giving him and his colleagues there at Robben Island hope. So even in that narrow construct, you can see that how important this kind of thing is. And so all these, and then the Blood Diamonds, you know, going to the different diamond stores and leafleting people who are consumers and working the media. And now the tools continue to evolve as the landscape evolves. You know, the landscape is so dominated by social media and how one tries to hijack the attention economy, how you can get your issue onto the radar of people. So we're going to have to be very, very creative in making the case for this particular issue to be taken seriously. And that's why at least our group in our coalition in the US is focusing on the basketball and the soccer. And like, you know, this is what there's millions and millions of people who are already care about this. And if you can get on their radar screen about, well, did you know that there was this aspect of your favorite sport or your favorite team that has this connection to some of the worst atrocities in the entire world? And most people don't know. I mean, it's not like people are just saying we don't want to do anything about it. They don't know about it. So it's using the tools that are out there, and I'm no expert on those, but using all of the various social media tools and multimedia tools would probably be a better word, to try to get attention paid to the issues. So I think it's still all about organizing. It's still all about assessing what the landscape is and trying to garner attention in that way, and then finding allies, particularly in the legislatures in different countries where there's already concern about what's happening, or there's already concern about human rights, and getting those folks to be allies, and trying to create as much noise as possible. In this case, I believe the Emirates and Saudis are not sports washing because they love sports. They're sports washing because they care so much about their reputations. And they invest billions of dollars in sports teams and leagues around the world because they are trying to improve and enhance their reputations. And if we can turn those reputation washing arrangements into reputational damage, because people start to see actually why are our teams and our leagues and are the sports we care about connected to these guys who are doing all this stuff, maybe it makes a difference. It's a bet, and I'm not sure it'll pay off, but it's what you do at the beginning of campaigns. You're trying to figure out what's going to stick and what's not going to stick, what could make a difference and what could not. And I think that's a thing that potentially could make a big difference.
Thank you, John. Zara, Maria, Matt, any additional perspectives from your side?
Yeah, I think John says everything, but I just want to add something like, working in change and activism space, it's up and down, always it's up and down. And one of the things that we're trying to put it not up and down is the strategy, as we always say in our practicing. But one of the important things is continuing. I mean, there is some moment which could be very bad moment, like when the war come in Sudan after Great Revolution, it's like a very, very dark moment in our history and in our life, personally in our life. But continuing is very important. Small things that you doing, it's may affect a lot in the future. It's like the drop of water in the rock. I think it's very important to continuing and trying to be creative and trying to be strategize your activities. This is very important things on that. So this is the only things I want to add.
Thank you, Sarah. Matt, I see you're muting yourself.
Yes, if I can add something of what John has said, the very important things, just two things I want to expand on it. First, the issue of collective action. We need to do more campaigns and to raise awareness. And also, not only that, we need to approach those who are in governments, because regardless of what we do, if those who are in government are not implement what we say or are not putting restrictions, it's hardly for us to achieve anything. And from my experience studying Sudan for over years, I have seen the political will, lacking of political will to enforce this thing, and also how this powerful network can use its state resources to enforce the will, and also to supply the financial network through exporting oil and gold and diamond, all these things. So what I would like to say is that we need to put a pressure on the government and also the legislators to pass laws that are more strict against to anyone involved in such doing unlawful things, and collectively that hopefully that we can undermine their activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Okay, I think we can go towards the closing. Again, I'm very sorry we cannot answer all the questions. The webinar was very rich indeed, and we want to continue to maintain it rich. So we will come back to you with the answers to the specific questions in writing, so rest assured about it. And we will also continue the conversation in our next events. So please stay tuned within the Pax Christi International newsletter, website, social media, wherever you feel comfortable to follow us. Please do, because we will continue to try to raise awareness and keep the attention alive on Sudan together with our colleagues. Of course, this is a path we walk together and not alone. So I think I will leave to Marta Inés, if I'm not wrong, for the closing part.
Yes, just to mention first, thank you to Mad, Maria, Sahra, Maua, John, to my colleague Julian, all the Sudan working group who contributed to the organization and the reflection of this important webinar. So I would mention only maybe 2 or 3 ideas. First, there are interconnections in this current social-political and economic model. The transactional diplomacy based on businesses, weakening the multilateralism and diplomacy for peace, and connected with corporate powers interested in the war, the bellic industry, and also interested in extractives, not only for the energy transition, but also for the defense, as it has been in Sudan, in DRC, in Venezuela, and many others. But the good news is that we civilians are also interconnected. So it is for our brothers and sisters in Sudan, and also for us as civil society organizations, movements around the world, to unveil this unjust system that is causing an unimaginable suffering to the Sudanese people. We call this in Latin America and the Caribbean a way to globalize our solidarity from our strong spirit and the strength of our soul and our capacity to transform from our local reality, as it has been said by Sarah, from our nonviolent capacity, a critical situation, to a peace building and a better environment for our people. So following the John Paul Lederach's peace building framework, we need to think and to strategize a comprehensive approach to build peace in divided societies, suffering atrocities, as it is the case of Sudan. So at the same time, you are presenting the way you respond to the crisis, including supplying the state's absence on basic rights services. We map our targets in terms of the influencing, the advocacy work we need to implement, and we design the future, including delegitimizing narratives, proposing nonviolent communication and citizen actions to resist and also to act. So your courage in the face of genocidal violence, your unwavering commitment to justice, and your refusal to be silenced speak to the profound strength of the Sudanese spirit. And as you continue this sacred work of peace building, know that you are not alone. The world's civil society organizations sees your courage, hears your cries for justice, and stands ready to support your journey toward a Sudan where all people, regardless the ethnicity, religion, or region, can live in dignity, peace, and harmony. So thank you very much. We will continue supporting that in all our efforts, all the movement, working for a sustained process for peace in the Sudan. So thank you very much to all, and we will continue in solidarity with all our spirit. Abrazos.
Thank you so much.
Bye.